Hello, this is the chapter reading for Check-In by Debra Parmley. Chapter 1. Bartlett police officer Leonard Len Yardley was less than thrilled to be on desk duty while his arm and shoulder healed from a gunshot wound he'd received a week ago. But that was the rule of the precinct and doctor's orders. So, Len was stuck inside at a desk filling out paperwork. It hadn't put him in the best of moods. Civilians had no idea how much paperwork cops do, even the cops out in patrol cars. Paperwork was his least favorite thing about his job. He liked having his feet on the ground, meeting challenges head-on and moving forward into them. That was his way. To be out among the people, or driving the streets and keeping them safe. Not stuck inside an office all day. He was restless, but looking forward to attending a cookout next Saturday at Nash Ware's place. Nash was planning to ask his girlfriend to marry him, and if she said yes, then the barbecue would be a celebration of their engagement. Nash's girl, Betsy Bobbin, was a quiet librarian who worked at the Bartlett Library. Nash was clearly head over heels in love with her. True love was good to see. Too often, Len saw the other side of people. He needed the reminder that some marriages were good ones and meant to last. The following Saturday, Len was getting ready for the barbecue, trying to find a shirt which covered his bandage well. He chose a loose Hawaiian print shirt that hid it well. No one would know he'd been wounded unless he told them. Leaving his Harley in the garage, he drove his truck to Nash's house and parked down the street. Already the street lined with cars. Nash's driveway and the driveway next door were full, so Len parked one street over. Other than the 9mm Glock Len always carried, along with his spare pistol, a Smith & Wesson, and his ID, which he wouldn't show anyone unless it was necessary, nothing marked him as a cop. He walked toward Nash's house, taking in the other houses and any activity around them as he checked Nash's house out. It was his way to always be situationally aware. Len had met the Marine veteran with the eye patch, the local Harley dealership fundraiser ride for the Children's Hospital last month. Nash had an unusual setup on account of having sight in only one eye. He had a series of custom mirrors mounted on his bike to give him good visibility, and he rode a 2003 Harley Road King 100th anniversary special that he'd restored after he came home from the Middle East. He also preferred to ride with at least one other biker, so for the children's fundraising ride, they'd paired up. Len had enjoyed getting to know the quiet Marine vet. He was, as Len's grandfather would have said, a solid guy. They'd stayed in touch, and Len had been invited to the barbecue. Walking to the backyard fence, he pushed the gate open and looked for Nash. Spotting the Marine over by the barbecue grill, Len stepped out and walked over to him. "Hey, Nash, great day for a barbecue." "It is." Nash shook his head, and then glanced up at the sky using his good eye to get a good look. He grinned. Not one rain cloud in sight. Last week, they'd had rain every single day. Sunshine and blue clouds were a welcome sight. The back door opened, and a pretty woman with long dark hair and blue eyes stepped out carrying an oven mitt. Betsy sent this out for you and said Pete's running late. He's bringing more ice and a big tub of vanilla ice cream." Nash grinned. "This party just gets better and better. Leanne, I'd like you to meet Officer Len Yardley." So much for no one knowing he was a cop. But that didn't matter now. "Hello," Len said, smiling down at the prettiest girl there, with her beautiful smile, nice curves, and a glow which went beyond her lightly tanned skin. She could have stepped out of his dreams. He wanted to get to know her. "Hello," she said, smiling up at him. "It's nice to meet you, Officer Yardley." "You can call me Len." "Len, I'm glad you could come to the celebration," she said. "This is a big day for my sister Betsy, and for Nash." She was clearly happy for her sister. She almost bubbled over with genuine excitement. It shone in her eyes and across her face. Rosy cheeks and bright blue eyes looked back at him. He couldn't help but smile deeper. "Officer Yardley is with the Bartlett Police Department," Nash said. "Ooh, a policeman." Leanne looked up at Len with new admiration. I love policemen. Len smiled at her and wondered why she looked familiar. Maybe it was her resemblance to her sister Betsy. They were alike but different, as Betsy had blonde hair and Leanne had dark hair. Their eyes were the same blue, and Leanne seemed the more striking of the two. How long have you been a policeman? Leanne asked. I wanted to be a cop ever since I was a little kid, so the minute I graduated from Parmley High School, I signed up to be an MP with the Air Force, he said. An MP? She questioned as if she didn't know what it was. Military police, he said. I served 6 years in security forces and made sergeant before coming home to join the Bartlett Police Department. I've been there 2 years. Oh, wow, Leanne's eyes widened. Are you one of the men who came to the mall after that stalker tried to abduct me? His face grew serious. Stalker? He nearly frowned. She had a stalker. Now in cop mode, he answered her, his tone serious. No, I wasn't there. You had a stalker? It's a long story, she shrugged. I'd bore you. Her story would certainly not bore him. He wanted to know. This party just started, he said. We've plenty of time, and no, you won't bore me. Tell me. This was 2 years ago, she said. That's why I thought you were one of the policemen who was there. I would have been newly hired and likely writing traffic tickets, he said. Everyone starts out that way. Tell me what happened. Leanne's sister Betsy, the librarian, came out the back door of the house carrying a bowl of coleslaw and 2 big packages of buns. She placed them on the long table just beyond the barbecue grill. I thought I bought 4 packages of buns, but they weren't in the grocery bags, so I called Jim. He's picking up 2 more on his way, she said. That's great, honey, Nash said, and Lance is bringing some kind of vegetarian dish because his new girlfriend doesn't eat meat. I'm glad they're bringing something she can eat, she said, her eyes wide. I didn't think about anyone being vegetarian. All 3 of your buddies will be late, she told Nash. I guess we better let everyone start eating and not wait on them. Betsy, stop fussing. Come and meet Len, Leanne said. Betsy walked over to them and they were introduced. Len had seen Betsy and knew of the pretty librarian, but hadn't met her. She has a sweet motherly nature. No wonder the children of Bartlett loved the children's story hour at the library with Miss Betsy. His niece, Natalie, loved Miss Betsy and story hour. Everything is ready, so dig in, Betsy said, and her soft voice didn't carry enough to be heard. Nash told everyone louder in his Marine voice. Len grinned. Marines and cops learned how to use a commanding voice people heard immediately. He could see Nash commanding troops. Partygoers lined up and began filling their plates. Len got in line behind Leanne and hoped they'd continue their conversation after they went through the line. When each had a plate full of food, he said, Where do you want to sit? Over by the bird feeder, she said. He glanced around the yard but didn't see one. The black pedestal with the lamp on top? Leanne said. Then he realized the lamp was a bird feeder, open on each side instead of having glass panels. Nash likes to tinker with things, making other things out of them, Leanne said. He's very creative. Clever idea, Len said. They headed to 2 seats nearby and sat by a small table. He hoped the cozy arrangement would help her share her story. After they were seated, he said, You were telling me what happened with your stalker? Oh, yes, she said. I was in college at Eastern Kentucky and had 2 more years to finish my degree in marketing. There was a guy in my algebra class who developed a crush on me. He signed up to be my tutor and tried to get close, but he wasn't my type, so I didn't let him in. His eyebrow went up. Someone in your class signed up to be your tutor? Yeah, that didn't raise a red flag for me at the time, she admitted. I was kind of naive. My sister pointed that red flag out later. He seemed to think I was his girlfriend, even though I kept turning him down for dates. He was always texting me or messaging me on social media. It was like he watched every single thing I did. I needed to keep going to tutoring because I suck at algebra and I needed to pass. You couldn't find another tutor? He asked. Well, I didn't think of it, she admitted. Then I came to Bartlett to visit my sister Betsy, and he messaged me about my kitten, Mr. Whiskers. Len smiled at the name and then forced a smile away to be serious again as he listened. He kidnapped Mr. Whiskers on campus, she said, but I was afraid to talk to him even though I knew he had Mr. Whiskers. He really creeped me out. A lot. You had a good reason to be creeped out, Len said. A pattern of abusing animals is often an early start for criminal behavior. Always trust your gut feeling. He turned out to be even crazier, she said. After those texts, he came to Bartlett with my kitten. He wanted me to get into his van to get my fur baby, and I wanted to rescue Mr. Whiskers. I yelled at her not to do it. Betsy had walked over as they spoke. We'd just come out of the Wolf Chase Galleria Mall, and he'd parked his white van right next to my car. He was waiting inside, ready to entice her with her kitten in a cage. I just wanted Mr. Whiskers, Leanne said. I didn't know he had a knife. Chapter 2. Never get in the vehicle, Len said. For any reason, do everything you can to stay out of it. Scream, shout, fight. I wasn't gonna get in, she shook her head. I knew to listen to Betsy, but he had a knife and he grabbed me. I'd called Nash and he was on his way, Betsy said. Thank God. It was terrifying. When Malcolm grabbed me and tried to pull me into the van, Nash pulled up in his truck and went for him. He saved my life. Malcolm, Len said. Would that be Malcolm Hess? Yes, that's him, Leanne nodded. I recall hearing about Hess trying to abduct you, Len said. The officer training me told me about it. Hess had a prior history of stalking. He never made it to trial and died in the hospital. That's right, Leanne said. They took him away in an ambulance. He had broken ribs and a punctured lung. That killed him before they could save him. I was so glad. He terrorized me for months. Now I'll never have to see him again. And I was so glad I had Mr. Whiskers back. I'm glad too, Len said. And how's Mr. Whiskers today? He's not a kitten anymore. He's a big cat, she said. But he's still a noisy night owl, and he gets into everything. He's been very naughty this month. Between finals and graduation, I haven't been home much. Graduation? He asked. Leanne just graduated from the University of Memphis with a BA in marketing, Betsy said, clearly proud of her sister. Congratulations, he smiled at Leanne. Thank you, she said, smiling back. What's next? He asked. I start working at Southern Security Bank next week, she said, assistant manager of the Bartlett branch. Nice, he said. Yes, she nodded. It's the most adult job I've ever had. Lots of responsibility. If they didn't think you were up to it, they wouldn't have hired you, he said. True, I suppose, she nodded. No supposing, he said. Bankers are dry and careful people. They're careful not to make mistakes. I wore my sister's most conservative suit to the interview, she said. I think that helped. I'm sure it did, he said. 2 years ago, Leanne was in her sorority party girl phase, Betsy said. Picture her long dark hair, black leather skirt, and black leather boots. Nothing wrong with leather, Len said. He'd like to see Leanne in leather on the back of his bike. That visual image stayed with him. He didn't mention his Harley. Today he'd driven the truck. Leanne in leather. She'd be hot. I'm sure the conservative look helped you get the bank job, Betsy said to Leanne. I think so too, Leanne nodded. They even have a dress code. I didn't know anyone still did that. A college campus isn't the real world, Betsy said. I can't imagine going to class in my pajamas and slippers. I don't even run to the drugstore for a prescription dress like that when I'm sick. Leanne laughed. No, you wouldn't. I've been to classes at EKU and to get ice cream in mine. Ice cream? Betsy's eyes widened and she shook her head. Len quietly laughed. The two sisters were very different. He wasn't about to tell them he didn't own a pair of pajamas. He threw on exercise shorts and carried his gun if he went to answer his front door. Most nights, he slept commando. Back then, I never worried about anything, least of all what someone thought about what I was wearing. Leanne had turned serious. These days, I'm looking for more security in my life. Hey, speaking of more security in our lives, she looked at her sister. When is the big announcement? Right after everyone eats their barbecue and before the cake comes, Betsy said. We even have an engagement cake. If it's supposed to be a secret, you're not keeping it very well, Leanne laughed. You might want to whisper. Whispering makes people listen closer, and a whisper can carry. Len dropped his low voice. For a secret, it's better to lower your voice like this. Leanne, leaning in to hear him better, breathed in, catching his scent. His cologne is nice. His smile's even nicer. And his muscles, the nicest of all. Thank you.